thankful to have Brian's Safehouse as well as the Sparrow's Nest. And so they're going to be sharing their stories. So if you have a student in here, we just want to let you know we have given them no restrictions. So this might be pretty raw. You're welcome to keep your kids in here. We just want to give you a heads up that this is real ministry today. All right, so we're going to go ahead. I don't want to take any more of their time. I'm not sure who's going to come first. We got a mic here, and you guys just come and share what God has laid on your hearts.
Good morning. We're so glad to be here at Legacy Church. We feel like we're among people that kind of think like we think. So glad to be a part of the service now and also a little bit later. I've heard that we've got restraints. I said it sounds like a lot of Baptists, like you got to be done by a certain time. I'm just saying. So this is Nick. He's from the Safehouse. He and Sammy came to the Safehouse together. That's his wife. And as a couple, Nick came in just a few days ahead of Sammy. And when he was here, when he came in, he was shattered and broken. But God was at work already when he came to the Safehouse. Nick and I have grabbed a few moments of conversation while we were working side by side. It's been such an emotional I still remember let's just call it a God moment. I'll get it together here. I still remember that day when Nick came to me and he said, Mr. Brush, I've been a mean man. I've been a mean man to my family. To my wife, to my children. I didn't care about my actions. I mean, I would be mean to Sammy and I would watch her deflate and react in whatever way she would. And then I would laugh, and I was okay with that. And then there was the letter that happened a few weeks back. Sammy and Nick had an in-house date. And yeah, an in-house date. They're pretty safe. And she gave him a list of questions that totally caught Nick off guard. And he said, something happened to me the next few days, and God changed me inside. And he showed me some truths about my life. He showed me who I was. And I want to be different. That's how God works, you know, from the inside out. They were at the end of hope when they arrived. And Nick and Sammy found themselves lost without answers. But God is transforming them now. They are new creatures in Christ. So Nick, I'll let you tell your story, and then Sammy, you can follow up.
So I guess I'm Nick. I'm 28. Me and my wife been together about 10 years. We have 3 kids. They're 8, 7, and 18 months. We, as Mr. Brush said, you know, we had a real real tough relationship in the past. I was physically, mentally abusive. Uh, we've been through a lot together, and uh, I've been a drug addict all these years. There was times she would definitely try to get me to stop. I didn't want to listen, didn't care. Uh, I love my kids, but it wasn't enough. I love the high more. I've been addicted to all different types of drugs at all different times in my life. And then what really began to change was in 2018. I worked out of town. She called me and she said CPS took our kids. Her mom actually got them. They were only supposed to be gone for about a week, but during that week, I continued to use, thinking maybe I could beat a drug test, which was not true. The morning I was supposed to go take a drug test, Samantha actually went into, she had some problems. We had to call an ambulance. She had an emergency C-section. And then our little girl spent 9 days in NICU in Charleston. And after that, we was renting a house, and this house we got kicked out. So we went to live with my grandpa, and my grandpa, many of you know, is a good Christian man. So he let me and her come live with him, and we stayed there. And this whole time, I was hooked on meth at this time and Suboxone. And she was trying to get me to quit. I'm still being physically and mentally abusive the whole time. And I knew I needed help, but I wasn't willing to go get it. I didn't want to. I liked being high more than I wanted to help. And we'd had multiple court hearings, and then, all of them were not good. And then my last court hearing, it was supposed to be in May of this year. They were going to terminate my rights, and they were going to give Samantha the opportunity to stay with me and lose her kids too, or divorce me and keep the kids. Well, this was when I really realized I kind of needed help. And then one day, my dad asked me to go to a gas station with him. And on the way there, we get there, and on the way back, he tells me my mom has breast cancer. I was the third person to find this out. And when I did, this is what completely broke me. And when I got home, I was thinking. I talked to Samantha. I told her I needed help. So I contemplated it for a couple days, and I started calling around a few places. And I called around Safehouse, and they told me to put in an application, so I did. And then I ended up calling them back once or twice, and they called me back finally and said, after about a week, we have a bed of them for you. And ever since I came to the Safehouse, God's been working in my life. The time I spend with my kids now is meaningful. I enjoy it. I'm not stressed out about them running around being kids as I was before, because I'm just not. It's what God does for you. And me and Samantha, we have a great relationship now. I don't know how she forgave me for the things I've done to her, but thank God for that. And today I'm a happy person. And I feel like I've got a great future before me and her and our 3 kids. That's all I got.
Okay, well, this is probably the hardest thing I've ever done. But he told you guys most of our story. But growing up for me was tough. My mom was a single mother, and she tried to do her best with me. I grew up in church, so I knew a little bit about God, but not much. I had a relatively quiet life until at 13, my mom told me that she was pregnant. It devastated me because it was just my mom and I for years, and I felt like I was being replaced. So I chose to go to Louisiana to live with my dad, who didn't have any rules, so I could do whatever I wanted. And because of that, by the time I was 17, I was partying all the time and had even experimented with drugs. I ended up deciding that it was time to move back to West Virginia, and not too long after that was when I met my husband. We had already had our 2 boys before I realized the extent of his addiction. But I wanted to keep my family together, so I chose to stay. After a while, I decided that I didn't want to feel the pain and the hurt anymore, so I started taking pills and anything else I could to try to make myself feel better. My husband and I had separated a few times over the years, but I always came back. We started using together, which slowly destroyed my life and our family, piece by piece. My faith in God was completely gone at this point. I had almost given up. My family tried to get me help, but I would never admit that I even had a problem. I tried to stay clean on my own by just taking Suboxone, but I would always end up falling back into other stuff. I ended up getting pregnant with our daughter in 2017. I was terrified, and I didn't want to hurt her, but I couldn't just stop. So a month before she was due, I started going to the Suboxone clinic. And then just 2 days later, I relapsed. I ended up going into labor with her, and she was 5 weeks early. I almost lost her life and my own. I kept going to the doctor for almost a year before I'd finally had enough. I had realized that I was just as bad off as I was before. I decided to go to detox, which I did cold turkey, and it felt like one of the hardest things I'd ever done, but I knew I could do it. After I got out, I had heard about Sparrow's Nest because my husband had talked to someone about Brian's Safehouse. I was so scared, but I was ready. So I applied, and on March 25th, 2019, I came to the Nest. When I look back at my life over the last year, I can see how different I am. I wasn't an honest or loving person. I was selfish, only worried about what anybody could do for me. Well, I did the bare minimum when it came to my family and everyone else. I didn't see any of the love that people were showing me. My in-laws had helped us get a car. My mom even took in our kids, and she cares for them like they're her own. They tried to help me and loved me even when I didn't deserve it. God has taught me how to forgive and how to love. My faith in Him has been restored, and He is helping me restore the relationships with my family. God is teaching me to be a good mother and a good wife, and He has helped me to see and to believe that I am fearfully and wonderfully made. My goals for my future are to have full restoration with my husband and our kids, and to have God be the center of our lives. God was there for me even when I thought that He wasn't. He saved me, and He loves me. And I know that love can be tough, but I will always try to show love to everyone because of the love that has been shown to me. I have come here today to let you know that there is hope for your life, just like there's hope for our lives.
Man, she's articulate, isn't she? Woo! That's good stuff. So Nick came to the Safehouse first, and there was about a week before Samantha came to the Sparrow's Nest. So my wife is in charge of the Sparrow's Nest and kind of keeps her fingers on all the things that go on over there. And I just kind of coast in and out of that place. And so Nick kept bumping me, right when he came in. He says, "Have you heard from Samantha yet? I just want to make sure she really is coming." And it's like, what is this? You're worrying about Samantha getting into the Sparrow's Nest? And he was quite relieved when she showed up a week later. So he's got 1 week in advance on her. So God is doing a wonderful thing in their life. The love of God really changes people. That's what really changes people, is the love of God. And you and I are just really here to share the love of God. And there is so much hope. You don't have to do it from a medically assisted approach. You can really change if you just surrender to God and allow Him to work in your life. The next person that I'd like to introduce to you is Casey. Casey, come on up. Now, this is a tall girl. We love Casey. When she arrived at the nest, she was a very angry person. Her relationship with her mom and dad were strained to the limit. After all, she wasn't even 21 and was planning her life the way she wanted it to go. Church life had yielded her, had yielded disbelief in her heart, and she wasn't even sure about this God thing at all. She had lost hope. She had tried to do things for herself because that seemed to be the only way out. But God had a different plan for her life. Let's listen to her tell that story.
I came from what most would call the perfect family. I grew up getting just about everything I asked for. I went to a small Baptist church where I knew everyone and everyone knew me. As I started to become a teen, I had many questions about God that I never felt that I could ask because of the fear of feeling judged. By the time I hit 18, my faith had slowly started to fade, and I started to rebel. Around this time, I had went to church on and off, and one Sunday night, when we were practicing for our Christmas play, the pastor looked at me, and he was talking to me, and he told me that I could only be forgiven so many times, and that God only knew how many times that would be. So at that point, I lost all my faith. I started to rebel against my parents and started staying away from home. I met a guy and fell in love, so I thought. He seemed so perfect until the day he introduced me to my new love, heroin. Before being introduced, the only thing that I had ever done was taken a couple nerve pills, so this high feeling was all new to me. As my addiction begun, my relationship got worse. 2 addicts together led to many black eyes and busted lips, but our highs always seemed to make everything better. The time came to where I told myself I had enough and I wanted better for myself. That lasted for about 3 months, and I started back with the same guy, but this time it was worse. It got so bad that I became so desperate for my next high that I allowed a guy to persuade me into stealing from my very own family. In October of 2018, I went into my parents' house, taking things equaling about $12,000, not caring at the time of how it would affect them. The next few days, I bounced from place to place, just worrying about how I was going to get my next high. On day 6 of being on the run after this had happened, my boyfriend at the time and I had gotten into a huge argument over drugs, and I told him I was fed up and ready to turn myself in. He became very angry with me, telling me that he was going to kill me and began to choke me. After coming to, I realized that I had enough and going to jail would be better than living this life. I met with my mom and went to turn myself in. Being arrested on grand larceny and a conspiracy to commit a felony charge really opened my eyes. My nights in jail were miserable, and detoxing in there only made it worse. In jail, I told myself I was never using again. After getting out, my parents loved me and cared for me enough that they let me come home with very strict rules. A few months later, I began to work and got my car legal, and I was on my uphill climb, doing so well until the same guy that I got into trouble with found out where I was working. Within a week, I was back with him, and I relapsed the same week. As soon as my parents found out, they set boundaries with me. They weren't going to allow me back at their house, and they told me that I needed to get help if I even wanted them to be any part of my life. So I applied at Sparrow's Nest, and just a few days later, I arrived. I didn't think that I even had a problem, but as time has went on, I have realized how much help I really needed and continue to need. With God, death has lost its grip on me. My life has changed in ways that I didn't even know were possible. I have renewed my faith with God, and I know that the Bible teaches that God forgives me for all of my sins. I am learning that I am a masterpiece of God's creation, And with God, my relationships with my family are being restored. I finally realized how much my family does love me, and I'm becoming a much more loving person with the help of God. I always took advantage of the ones who loved me and looked for love in all the wrong places. Now, with God's help, I'm learning how to protect my heart by knowing what real love is and by setting boundaries to keep the bad out. I hope to move forward with my education after graduating, if it's God's will, and I know that He does have big plans for my life, and I can't wait to see where He leads me. I praise God for the peace that I have today that I have never had before in my life, and through Christ, you can have that same peace.
Thank you. Beautiful job. God is so good. All right, Zach, come on up here. This is an old hand here. He's been around for a little bit. His stepfather, Rick, is a committed follower of Christ, and his loving mother, they weren't enough to keep Zach on the grace path. Now, his sister, oh yeah, she became the truth teller and the whistleblower for the family. When he came to the Safe House, he was an articulate liar and came to get the pressure of the family off of his back. His early adult life has been so full of hurt and heartache and failure. And God's universal law of sowing and reaping has certainly been evident in Zach's life. He's come to the place of surrender, and now he's here to share his journey of joy.
9:30 in the morning, I'm emotional. Golly. I can't even use this. I'm going to have to move a little bit. I need all this. Well, like they said, my name is Zach. I'm 31. I grew up in Beckley, grew up in church. Actually, Kelly was my youth pastor. Him and his wife been amazing people. I've known them a long time. Came to the Safe House in December 13th, 2018. And God's done a lot of amazing things. I've seen him. It's funny how you can see God work through other people so much more than you see him work in your own life until you take a step back and look. So before I got to the Safe House, I was a heroin addict. I was an alcoholic. And I was pushing everybody that I loved away from me. Anybody that would try to tell me to stop, we weren't talking anymore. It didn't start there. I didn't sign up to be a heroin addict. Nobody read the fine print to me. Whenever I was 16, I started smoking pot and drinking. And it was just fun, wanting to be cool, hang out with friends. Had all the friends in the world. Something happened, man. My dad passed away. He had colon cancer. He fought it hard and long. Whenever my dad passed away, he only weighed 70 pounds. He was jaundiced because his liver was beat down from radiation and chemo. He couldn't talk, and he was in constant pain all the time. And man, not only did that break me and throw some gas on the fire for how I was living, I watched it break my family. And that hurt me more. 13 months after that, my brother-in-law, my sister's husband, was shot and murdered. He was a Beckley cop, and he was doing an undercover drug buy one night and was shot and killed over $100 worth of cocaine. So now, once again, I was back to the same spot where I looked around and watched it break my sister. I watched it break my mom. Both of them were now widows with children and no way to go. And I was 18 at this point, and I had two options. One, be a man and be there for my family, or hide all the pain that I was feeling. So I chose to get high and get drunk and party and chase everything that I wanted. Like Solomon in the Bible, I looked for everything but God to make me happy. I tried money, cars, clothes, women. Nothing made me happy. So at this point, by the time I was 21, I was already addicted to Oxycontin. And I just kept using drugs to escape with. I was given great opportunities in my life. Like I said, I had a really good family. So by the time I was 25, I got a good job working for the government. A federal job. I was a nuclear welder. And I was so entitled and such a spoiled little brat, to be honest, that I just felt like I couldn't get fired. So I did whatever I wanted while I was there. Partied, drank, didn't call into work. While I was down there, I ended up having a little boy. I got a 4-year-old kid now, but I found out I had a kid here while I was living there. Me still being a child, I didn't know how to handle that because me and the girl weren't together. So I didn't know how to be a dad. And so I just fought every way trying to do things on my own, trying to figure out how to control that situation, and I couldn't. So I was drinking, getting high. I was on my way in from down there. I hadn't been to sleep in like 2 days. At this point, I was doing meth and other drugs. I hadn't been to sleep in 2 days, hadn't been to work in like 5 days. Just decided to drive into Beckley. That was my great idea. I was like, I can definitely drive right now. So on the way, I fall asleep driving, and I'm doing like 80 on the interstate. And by the grace of God, I didn't hurt nobody, nor myself. And then the cops showed up, and I was like, well, I'm going to jail. No, cops didn't even know I was high or drunk, nothing. They saw my badge that I was wearing. They were like, you work for the government? I was like, yeah. They were like, we'll drop you off at the airport, and you can figure out how to get home. I was like, all right. That was by the grace of God. Nothing bad happened out of that. So that was, then a couple weeks after that, I lost my security clearance and got fired. And then that pattern just repeated. I got another job when I got back here. At this point, when I got back here, I was only doing pills and stuff, and I met a guy, and he was like, I got heroin. Smart as I am, I was like, that sounds like fun. It sounds like me. So I started doing heroin, and then, to be honest with y'all, I didn't do it at this point anymore because I did it because what I'd used to escape with my whole life from pain and loss and grief, I was now enslaved with. There was no walking away at this point. So I'm living in Beckley. I'm living at my mom's house. I get fired from my job for stealing money here, right down here at 84, and got fired from there from stealing money, and totaled my car on my lunch break while I was working there. So I fell asleep driving at 12 o'clock in the afternoon. Once again, didn't get in trouble, didn't hurt nobody, didn't hurt myself. Cops said nothing. Once again, that's the grace of God, but I didn't see that then. This whole time, I didn't understand what I was doing to myself, how I was abusing drugs to make myself feel better, how bad I was hurting every single person around me. I was killing people. My sister would beg me to come to church. Zach, you need to do something. You need God. I was like, no, I don't. I need to fix this on my own. I thought for some reason I could fix this. So over and over, she would ask me to come to church. I wouldn't. And I still didn't see all this after all this loss. At this point, I'm strung out on heroin. I'm an alcoholic. I'm living in my mom's house. I'm pretty much homeless living with her. Have no car, no job, nowhere to go. That's it. At this point, I'm so depressed. I hate who I've become. I'm full of guilt and shame, fear, and I just hated my life. I would pray, God, just don't let me wake up in the morning. I've really felt like that, and standing here now, I can't believe I thought like that, but that's really how I felt. I would rather have just not woke up. I felt like I was a burden to everybody around me. One thing that really got me to realize that I needed some help is when I walked into this church, this very one. I walked into Legacy, and I stood right there. Had to hug one of my best friend's moms because her son just overdosed and died on heroin a month after he got out of prison. We grew up together, stayed night at each other's house, go to movies. We were just friends. We lived the same life. Thing is, he got caught and did 10 years in prison, and I didn't. And he was in and out. And that really hurt me because I remember sitting right there where we're sitting right now. I remember my sister's friend, Michelle, looked over at me and said, Zach, you all right? My famous answer is always, yep. It means I'm definitely not all right. So at that point, I was just broken inside. I was like, man, this is the bet I'm making. This is how it's going to end. I know how this story ends, and I'm going to have to get in this bed soon. I was thinking when I got home, I was like, who's going to show up to my funeral? I done pushed everybody away. Who's going to tell my sister that I overdosed and died? Who's going to tell my mom I died drinking and driving? And I just started thinking about all the people and who's going to tell who. And I thought about my little boy. And I said, who's going to tell him that he's 4? Who's going to tell him your dad died of a drug overdose or he died drinking and driving? I was going to put that on his mom. He's got a good mom, and You know, she's put up a lot with me. She has no reason to let me see my kid how I've acted, and she still does. And I thank God for that, and I used to take it for granted every day. And I would be very mean to her because I didn't know if I felt like. And I still struggle with myself with that. And something happened, like I said, that day. I knew I needed help, so that really spoke to me. I feel like God was using that as a moment to let me see where this was going. So with that, I ended up telling my family, you know, I'm a heroin addict. I'm on heroin. They knew something was wrong. They just didn't know exactly what. So I just finally, the best thing to do for me was just to tell somebody, because once the cat's out of the bag, it's out. So I just went ahead and said it. And then, you know, it was a fight for a little bit after that, but I ended up at Brian's Safehouse. Had some struggles there. You know, I was there about 2 months. I'll just go ahead and tell you, I was there like 2 months, got kicked out because I had a cell phone. I went back out, was using heroin again within like a week, and by the grace of God, they let me come back earlier because they were worried that I was going to literally die while I was out. But since I've been back, you know, my relationships with my family have got so much stronger. I love the Lord. I've seen him do things that I just can't believe were possible, because throughout my life, all I ever saw was what God took from me or what he didn't give me. I never was looking at the blessings that I had, a family that was strong trying to help me, that stood by me no matter what I did. And I just thank God for that, man. And I'm just excited to see what else he has to do with me, because honestly, I don't know how this story ends. I just know one way it won't end if I follow God for the rest of my life. Man, that's all I got. Thank y'all.
Thank you there, Zach. All right, Amanda, come on up here. When Amanda first learned that she was going to give her testimony this morning, she goes, I'm not doing that. I didn't say a word. Her sister is a graduate from the Sparrow's Nest, and she had found hope in God through the love of Christ. And she's been working at a local dentist as an assistant. And nearly every visit from the Sparrow's Nest to Dr. Finch's office, there Stacy would be, and she would always share the burden of her heart, which was Amanda, her sister. She was so worried. She was concerned. Amanda's life had changed for the worse, and especially in the last years. She was isolating completely from her family, and legal problems began to stick. Using drugs to cope with those problems, Amanda would stay high and try to avoid all the consequences of the lifestyle that she had fallen into. The legal system, though, stopped her reckless approach, and she gladly came to the Sparrow's Nest after a few nights behind the bars. Watching the transformation in her life demonstrates the love of God and his hope. Go ahead and tell us your story.
When I was young, my life revolved around love for my parents and my close family. I was very attached to my parents and was also very close with my great-grandma. It was so wonderful to have a tight-knit family. I always felt loved and secure. When I was in middle school, my great-grandma passed away, and it hit me hard. My whole family had always gathered at her house to spend time together, and then all of a sudden that was gone right when I was becoming a teen and needed that closeness. This made me question God and why he would do this to my family. Once she was gone, it was like I lost my motivation to do good. When I started high school, I strongly felt the need to fit in. As I struggled with anxiety, drinking became a way for me to relax and calm my nerves. I wanted to do things my own way after I'd always done what I was told. I felt like for the first time I was in control of my life, and I didn't see anything wrong with occasional partying. But soon, drinking led to pills led to heroin, and that became the focus of my everyday life. I lost my job, my car, and worst of all, I lost my ability to put my daughter Chloe's needs before my own.
My sister showed Chloe and I the greatest act of love and understanding when she stepped up to care for my daughter when I couldn't. I started getting into trouble with the law over the next couple years. I had given up any hope that I would get away from the chaos and the pain. I was convinced that my addiction would lead to my death. When I got arrested in April, I was facing a 6 to 60-year prison sentence. But because my parents still had faith in me, they hired me a lawyer who fought for me to come to the Sparrow's Nest instead of prison. While I was in jail, I didn't know why at the time, but I started reading a Bible someone had left there. I started to become intrigued by the stories I was reading about Jesus. As soon as I got to the Sparrow's Nest, God gave me an unmistakable feeling of peace that I'd never felt before. This was possible because I was ready to give my heart to the Lord. I know without a doubt that this is exactly where I'm meant to be. God continues to remind me how important love is, and with His help, I'm mending my relationship with my daughter, my parents, and the rest of my family. I've come to realize and embrace the fact that everything I went through was for a reason. I'm excited about my future for the first time in years. God has transformed my heart with His saving grace and brought my soul alive. I have confidence now that the changes I've made and the changes that I will make are leading me to be the woman God created me to be and the mother that Chloe needs me to be. This includes teaching her about God's love. And I want everyone hearing this to know that God loves you too, and there's hope for everyone.
Thank you, Amanda. So we're going to just take a pause here now because it's getting close to the witching hour, 10 o'clock. So we're going to just hold the testimonies at this point. Joey is going to testify in the next service, and so is Billy. They both have great stories. But I just want to take a minute and point out the staff and those that are volunteering to work for the Safehouse and the Sparrow's Nest. So would you guys go ahead and stand up real quick? Yes. There they are. These are the people. That's right. They pour their heart and soul into these residents every single day and just give and give and give the love of God. And that's what it takes. There is hope, people. I just want you to know you can reach out into the community with confidence that God's love is stronger than drugs. It really is. He can change your life forever. Go ahead, Brother Kelly. Thank you so much.
We appreciate you guys being here. I've been praying. I'm not going to preach to you. And I've been praying about what it was that the Lord would have me to share. And actually, several people that spoke, I've known them since they were young. And to me, from the outside, it's pretty hard to hear because I didn't get it. I wonder how many family members that are here, and when you hear, I know we have some family members that came, and I'm sure guilt starts to hit you. I can remember going to Zach's. I wouldn't call it an intervention, but the Lord led me to just go to his house one night. We knew stuff was going on, and just to get real with him, I don't have an issue doing that. But we don't know. How many of you from the Safe House and the Nest, I love that picture of the nest, I love that. How many of you had a background in church? Would you please raise your hand? I don't want to point you out. God's getting ready to make some changes here. God's opened my eyes to some things. Walking into a facility will not change your life. Telling people in authority in churches what they want to hear will not change your life. Guys, checking a box is not going to change your life. And I'm going to share with you what the Lord wants me to share with you. And I think what we have witnessed today is through you guys being obedient, through you being honest. I think there's some other people here, man, and you've been on the outside of this thing. You've been looking around, you've been walking in a church, and maybe you think you're okay, and I'm sure a lot of these men, a lot of these women thought they were okay, and they had backgrounds in churches. And I'm just going to share with you what I feel like the Lord wants me to share with you, and it's the most important thing that we'll ever hear in the Word of God. This is in Romans chapter 3, verse 21. It says, "But now God has shown us a way to be made right with Him, without keeping the requirements of the law." You see, through the entire Old Testament, people thought that they could follow a rule. They could do what a priest told them to do. They could do what a Sadducee or a Pharisee told them to do. And by checking a box and following a list of rules, that they were okay. That was never God's intention for man. But thankfully, He says, but now God has shown us a way to be made right with Him, without keeping the requirements of the law, as was promised in the writings of Moses and the prophets long ago. We're made right with God by placing our faith in Jesus Christ. And this is true for everyone who believes, no matter who we are. You see, at this point, the only people that had salvation, that even had an opportunity to receive salvation in God, were Jews. Or Israelites. You had to be born into this family to have any hope whatsoever. If you were a Gentile, there was no hope. And I'm ashamed to say that in the society in which we live, people look at individuals who are in a certain season in their life, who have these struggles and are doing these things. I am so glad that you shared what you shared. I'm so glad. I think I know who you are, but I'm not positive. Yeah, I do? Okay. So I know the parent, I know them, didn't know the story. And when I think about a sister, when I think about a mom and a dad that didn't give up on people, I think about the God that we serve. I'm ashamed to say that in the area in which we live, a lot of people, a lot of churches turn their back on folks with needs. That is not the God that we serve. You see, in the Old Testament, you had to be born into the right family. You had to check the right boxes. But I'm glad for the truth of God's Word. I'm glad that God tore that veil, that He made a way that individually we could deal with God Himself. I don't have to go through a priest anymore. I don't have to go through another man. I'm glad God puts people in our lives. But you know what I want us to do today? As the worship team, would you guys please come on up? I want to read to you again Romans chapter 3, verse 22, and then I'm going to read verse 23. We are made right with God by placing our faith in Jesus Christ. And this is true for everyone who believes, no matter who we are, whether you're a Jew, whether you're a Greek, here for the Old Testament. So for us today, whether you're an addict, whether you're a pretender, whether your parents drag you into this church week after week or they drag you into another church week after week, we need to quit pretending that we're okay. A lot of you have friends that kept pretending that they were okay and they're no longer on this earth. How many of you have lost friends? To drugs, to alcohol, to addiction. They pretended like they were okay. The spiritual needs that are before us today, I'm convinced, are just as important as any other addiction that people deal with. Quit pretending like you are okay. Verse 23. For everyone has sinned. Everyone has sinned. We all fall short of God's glorious standard. Yet God freely and graciously declared that we are righteous. He did this through Christ Jesus when He freed us from the penalty of our sin. Here's what I'm going to ask you. I'm going to ask you to stand with me. This seems really odd to me. I would not have expected that God would have just shared straight salvation, but I feel like there's some people that you're pretending. You're pretending like you have a relationship with Christ. You're pretending like your sins are covered by the grace of Jesus Christ. You're pretending like everything's okay in your life, and you're broken. You're hurting, and you question and you doubt whether you really even know who Jesus Christ is. I want to give you an opportunity. I want to give you an opportunity. I promise you two things. Number one, you will not pray alone. You will not pray alone in this church. And number two, I promise you, you will not be judged. You'll be loved on. You'll be encouraged. So I'm going to ask her to sing, and if you feel like God is dealing with you to respond to this, I'm not going to beg you.